نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونؤمن به ونتوكل عليه ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا من سيئات أعمالنا من يهد الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلله فلا هادي له ونشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له ونشهد أن سيدنا وحبيبنا ومولانا محمدا عبده ورسوله. قال الله تعالى في كتابه الكريم بعد أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم وأقيموا الصلاة وآتوا الزكاة واركعوا مع الراكعين أتأمرون الناس بالبر وتنسون أنفسكم وأنتم تتلون الكتاب أفلا تعقلون. صدق الله العظيم. فقال النبي الكريم صلى الله تعالى عليه وسلم إن الله لا يجمع أمتي على ضلالة ويد الله مع الجماعة أو كما قال عليه الصلاة والسلام. أما بعد. When you think about who the teachers you've had in your life are, the people who have shaped you as an individual, who you are, there are many different ones. But the first ones, for most, to truly teach and impart knowledge are your parents, a person's parents, the mother and the father of a child. And there are times where even you find out something that they taught you was perhaps not the ideal. Perhaps it wasn't even correct, right? And in spite of the knowledge that you now have in learning that it wasn't correct or learning that it was not the ideal or not the right way, even then, knowing the truth, it becomes difficult to pull yourself away from that. You always have this level of almost loyalty that whatever it is that your parents, your elders teach you, you want to hold on to that, right? It's hard to let go. It's a funny story about, that I thought I would share in line with that. When I was young, I was elementary school maybe. At school they were asking all the kids, where did your parents go to school? Where did your parents go to college? And I remember that I didn't know the answer to the question. I'd never asked my father, where did you go to college? It wasn't, I think most immigrant families, it's probably not a conversation that you have, right? And so when I got home, I asked my dad, well, where did you go to school? And he said to me, with a straight face, he said, I went to the school of hard knocks. And so I heard that, and I was a kid. I didn't know this was like a whole thing. I didn't know this was a joke that he was making. So when I went to school, I mentioned, my dad, he went to the school of hard knocks. And the teacher just smiled, and she said, okay, great, and then went to the next person. And I still remember that for whatever reason, that subject never came up for years and years, probably a decade plus, until there was another conversation that was being had in a classroom or in a school. And I was in that environment, and with my friends, with people around, and they were talking about something about, oh, where did your parents go? Where did this? And I said, oh yeah, my dad went to the school of hard knocks. And people laughed at me, right? Because I was making a joke, or at least they thought I was making a joke. When in reality, what I thought was true was something that even learning that what he had told me was a joke, I still always, really? Are you sure? And it wasn't until I went and saw him. I spoke to him and I said, hey, Dad, is this true? And he said, it was just a joke. I didn't even remember that I told you that. But in that the key thing is that he told me something once, just once. And it stuck with me, right? Now, it wasn't a profound lesson there. And there are a whole host of those that he did teach me. But the key thing is that parents are often the first teachers of something. And kids, as much as we often think to ourselves, oh, they're just a kid, they don't see this, they don't understand this, they do. Implicitly, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has created mankind in a way where they understand things implicitly, within the fitrah, within the inside. The insan just has this natural intellect, this understanding. I mention that because what parents tell their kids carries a lot of weight. But what carries more weight very often, actually not very often, what carries more weight in every situation is not what is said, but what they do. Not what is said, but what is done. You know that famous saying that you hear, do as I say, not as I do, right? We've all heard this before. Do as I say, not as I do. But when you investigate that statement, it doesn't hold up in light of the Quran, in light of the Sunnah. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the Quran tells us, أَتَأْمُرُونَ النَّاسَ بِالْبِرِّ وَتَنْسَوْنَ أَنفُسَكُمْ وَأَنْتُمْ تَتْلُونَ الْكِتَابِ. That do you advise people, do you tell people, you need to do this, and you forget your own self in that equation? That you don't act on the very thing that you're telling someone to do. You say, oh, you need to read Quran, or you need to go to school, or you need to do this, you need to always be learning, whatever it might be. Right? Here specifically the verse is talking about practices of the deen, of morality. But the concept applies universally. That if you are teaching or telling someone something, أَتَأْمُرُونَ النَّاسَ بِالْبِرِّ, you are advising people to do something that is correct, that is in line with piety, with righteousness. وَتَنْسَوْنَ أَنفُسَكُمْ, but you forget yourself. How does that work? أَفَلَا تَعْقِلُونَ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala ends this verse with, He says, don't you think? What kind of brain are you operating with? You're telling people to do what you say, not what you do? Doesn't add up, doesn't make sense. The Prophet ﷺ, he taught us about the importance of a teacher, of an alim, following their advice before anybody else. مَثَلُ الْعَالِمِ الَّذِي يُعَلِّمُ النَّاسَ الْخَيْرَ وَيَنْسَى نَفْسَهُ. The Prophet ﷺ said that the alim, the teacher, the one who teaches people regarding good deeds, regarding good actions, and they forget themselves, كَمَثَلِ السِّرَاجِ يُضِيءُ لِلنَّاسِ وَيَحْرِقُ نَفْسَهُ. It's the example of it is like a lamp that lights things up for other people but burns itself out. Right? Today we don't know that concept because you've never used a gas lamp before. Right? But imagine if, for example, you have something else burning inside of a lamp and it burns itself out while providing light to other people. What's the benefit that the thing that burned up got? It didn't get a benefit. It provided a little bit of benefit for other people, but it didn't get its own benefit. This is the example that the Prophet ﷺ gives. That's the first reason. The second is that this statement of do as I say, not as I do, the second reason it doesn't make sense is because we live in a world where the moment you lose credibility, there are 1,000,001 other resources available for someone to ask questions to. You understand this? This is the world that we live in. Google, that's last year's news, okay? Today we live in a world of ChatGPT and AI, chatbots and beyond. So many different things. If you tell your kids, you have to just do what I say. Just do it, right? I told you to do it, so do it. That may have worked 40, 50 years ago. It may have worked 40, 50 years ago. But in today's world, guess what's going to happen? Do what I said. I don't want to hear it. Just do what I said. Guess what's going to happen? Hey, ChatGPT, my dad told me to do this. Should I do it? My mom said I should do this. Should I do this thing? And it's going to tell. What do you think it's going to tell them? You think it's going to say, oh, your parents, you should always listen to them because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran that you do. You think that's going to happen? You think that's how that's going to work out for you? No, not in the slightest. What they're going to hear from you is, do what I say, not as I do. And what they're going to see when they ask their chat bot or their friends is, oh, this is hypocrisy. This is wrong. You can't follow this. Here's the thing. The intentions may be sound. The intent behind what is being taught, what is being told, do this. Maybe I don't do it, but that doesn't mean you shouldn't do it. The intent behind it can 100% be sound. You should go to the masjid even though I don't go to the masjid. That could be sound. The problem is that this is not a way that resonates with people. Think about it from this perspective. When Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent prophets, there's nobody who knows us as human beings better than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Your creator is the one who knows his creation best. And so think about what it is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala did with his prophets alayhimus salam. Did Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala send his prophets in spite of what is taught in other faiths? Did he send his prophets as fallible people? Did he send them as people who were committing sins just like everybody else? The answer is no. The belief and the understanding and the reality is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent prophets and He protected them from sin. Why? Well, again, think this is the perspective we have to take. When Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows us better than anyone, what He knows is very simple. That when we see a disconnect between what someone says and what someone does, we internally turn off or turn away from that person. We don't have the same desire to follow what that person is telling us as we would if they were aligned. When they are aligned, now the chances of me listening are exponentially higher. But if someone comes to me and says, hey, you should really make sure that you give sadaqah every single Friday. And I see this person come into the masjid and they don't use their phone, they don't use it outside, they don't ever give sadaqah themselves, right? What am I going to think to myself? Okay, why don't you do it first, right? You're telling me to do this, why don't you do it? Fix your own home, right? Fix your own self first before you want to come give me advice. The same principle applies. This is why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, knowing His creation, sent prophets who were protected from sin, so that when prophets alayhi wasallam said, do not commit zina, they were not committing zina. When prophets alayhi wasallam said, do not lie, they weren't lying. They weren't cheating and stealing from people. They were honest, sincere, righteous individuals, because this is what aligns people. This is what gets people to follow. Simple concept. But very often we lose sight of it. Oh, just do what I say. It doesn't matter if I do it or don't do it. No, you have to just do what I'm telling you. The Prophets ﷺ were the best of examples. Famously though, we even see this with Umar ibn al-Khattab radiallahu anhu. One of the things that tore him up inside before he took his shahada was that the Quraysh would talk about, we need to preserve the example of our forefathers. Our forefathers, they used to worship these idols, and they would also give to people who were needy, and they would also be kind, and they would also be generous, and they would also be polite. And yet, when they dealt with the Prophet ﷺ, what he would consistently see is that the Quraysh were harsh, they were rude, they were not generous. And on the flip side of it, when the Quraysh approached the Prophet ﷺ with this anger, when they approached him in this way where they were being rude and harsh and evil, the Prophet ﷺ didn't respond with it in kind. The Prophet ﷺ, being a beacon of virtue, of goodness, he stayed silent. He was not going to respond to what they were saying. And this is in line with what the Quran teaches. وَإِذَا خَاطَبَهُمُ الْجَاهِلُونَ قَالُوا سَلَامًا. When the ignorant people come and try to argue with you and this and that, oh, this is that, you just say, peace. Not interested in fighting with you. Not interested in having this conversation. Thank you very much. Have a good day. That's it. But that's what we have to understand. If a parent tells their children, don't get angry, don't fight with people, but then they're yelling at their wife, right? The father is yelling at his wife, the mother's yelling at her husband. No, but you can't get angry. What about you? Well, don't do as I'm doing, do as I say, be better than me. That's great, in theory. We're not living in theory. We don't, as human beings, live theory. We live reality. And what we have to think about, what we have to understand, is that when we allow the words that we say to be in conflict with the actions that we perform, what we are really talking about, as uncomfortable as it is hypocrisy. We're talking about hypocrisy. And everybody hears that and they think, look, I'm not a hypocrite though. I don't think I'm a hypocrite. I don't think I'm this. I don't think I'm that person, because in the Quran, what's worse than a hypocrite? في درك الأسفل من النار. They will, as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us, they'll be in the very lowest, worst places of the hellfire. I don't want to be a hypocrite. And so instead of confronting that I may have traces of it, because understand, hypocrisy is not a single state. To be a hypocrite is not a binary. It's not that one day you're not a hypocrite, the next day the switch flips, suddenly you're a hypocrite. That's not how it works. Hypocrisy is a pathway. It's a journey. It's a walk that you take. And every step down that road puts you further and further away from being able to escape it. What is the solution, though, to that? How do you prevent yourself from falling into hypocrisy? Well, the crux of it is, and the simple way of understanding it is, that the true hypocrite is the one who is unable to ask themselves the question, honestly and sincerely, am I a hypocrite? True hypocrites, they don't take a moment and step back and say, you know what? Am I hypocritical? Am I doing things wrong? No, they don't. But the less we are willing to engage in that conversation with ourselves, the less we're willing to ask that question of ourselves, the further we are going down a path that we won't be able to turn around from. Right? We have to understand this. Do as I say, not as I do. This is not what our deen teaches us. And if we think that it is, well, you're wrong. But more importantly, we are on a pathway of hypocrisy, which is a pathway none of us want to be on. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to protect our hearts and to keep us from hypocrisy. أقول قولي هذا وأستغفر الله لي ولكم لسائر المسلمين فاستغفروه إنه هو الغفور الرحيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيد المرسلين سيدنا ونبينا محمد وآله وصحبه وسلم أما بعد. I mention all this, brothers and sisters, because it's a simple reminder of the idea that we need to practice what we preach, right? If we're going to teach our siblings and our children and our families that Islam is the most important thing in our lives, we need to live that, right? Because today more than ever, there are more and more people that are inauthentic than anything else. There's a whole industry of, we all know this, an industry of people who want to try and sell you something that is 1/10 of the size that it looks like and twice as fragile, right? You go on these websites where they sell you something for 10 cents and then you get another thing for $1 and you think, oh, I've really succeeded because I got 17 things for $6. And then you get those things and it was supposed to be this big, it's this big. It's supposed to stand up and hold up to the rigors of things. It said it was really durable and it breaks at the first time you move it. This is the world we live in. There's no denying this. We need to understand this. So what we don't need is more liars. We don't need more inauthentic people. We don't need hypocrites, at least more than we already have. What we need is sincerity, right? We need people who are honest. We need people who live the idea of being a believer. Live the idea of being a Muslim. And we have to be honest then as well. That just to call myself a Muslim is not enough. Yes, you get to participate in the census and you get to be part of a box that you check off if my identity is that I'm Muslim in that sense. But the problem is it doesn't mean anything in reality, right? It might seem like it's enough in the context of where we live. The society, the country, the place that we live in, we have people who claim to be religious people according to their faith, and the reality is that you practicing 10% of your faith seem like you're the most pious person in the world compared to them, because they practice 0% of their faith. They practice 0% of what their faith teaches. But unfortunately, the problem is this: any multiple of 0 is still 0. You understand? So you can never get to a point where looking at what someone else does, oh, this person, they only go to their church or their synagogue or their place of worship. They only go there once a week. Well, I go to mine once a week. What's wrong with that? We don't hold ourselves to that standard. That's not our standard. You know what our standard is? Our standard is what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala told us in the Quran. كُنْتُمْ خَيْرَ أُمَّةٍ لِلنَّاسِ أُخْرِجَتْ لِلنَّاسِ. You are the best nation. You are the best people brought out. تَأْمُرُونَ بِالْمَعْرُوفِ. You do good. You teach good. You advise people to do good. وَتَنْهَوْنَ عَنِ الْمُنْكَرِ. You prevent people from doing things that are wrong. You stop them. You say to them that, listen, this is not acceptable. This is not all right. We don't believe that this is all right. وَتُؤْمِنُونَ بِاللَّهِ. And you believe in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But believe, brothers and sisters, here, this is not a noun. It's a verb. This is why when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about belief, even in this verse, He does not simply bring belief. He does not simply say it's okay to just believe. In every instance where He mentions belief, He mentions action with it as well. الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا وَعَمِلُوا الصَّالِحَاتِ. Those who believe and do good. Can't separate it. Can't distinguish between the two. Because faith and belief inspire towards action. Although action may not always inspire towards faith. The process starts with faith, but it doesn't end with belief. Because guess what? We know, you know, and I've said it before, there's one who believes in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala more than you could ever believe. He believes in Allah more than you could ever believe. And it's Iblis. Because shaitan has been right in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala before. And you never have in that way. And yet, you tell me, is that enough for him? Is that sufficient for Iblis? Is Iblis going to get to go to Jannah because he believes that Allah is real? Is that enough? You tell me. Right? And if we take a second and think about that, we have to understand just identifying, believing, saying, I'm Muslim. Yes, this is good. That's the starting point. Right? And the journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step. But it is not the end of the journey. It is not the end of the road. It's not, oh, I believe and so I'm good. What does this all mean in practical terms? I leave you with 3 things. The first, if you believe that doing good deeds is important, you have to live that. You want to teach your kids that, you have to live it. If you want to say going to the masjid is good, you need to live it by going to the masjid. You believe giving sadaqah is good, and it is good. You have to live it by teaching your children, showing your family, showing the people around you, living that example. The Prophet ﷺ was asked, what's the best gathering? He said, a gathering of those who inspire you to remember Allah when you see them, whose discourse, whose conversations encourage you and increase your knowledge, and whose good deeds inspire you to remember the hereafter. You know where that happens more than anywhere else? The masjid. Doesn't happen in your house as consistently. Doesn't happen at the dawat place or the party or this or that or the hotel or what. Doesn't happen there. Not in the same way it happens at the masjid. At this masjid, we're so blessed. We have such diversity. The rows here, I always think to myself, man, how many ethnicities, how many races do we have here today? Right? We got people from Ghana and Mali, and then we have people from Pakistan and India, and then we have people from Uzbekistan and Tajikistan and Kazakhstan, and every which way, every possible country. And after Salah, we have groups of people gathered, the young brothers who are 15 different colors, and the elders, those who are a little older, they're standing and talking and having these conversations, and they're doing it in a place where every time they look around, they see the words of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Every time they look around, they see the name of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They see the name of His Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. That is the best place you could possibly be. And it doesn't always need to be religious conversations. This is this foolish idea, oh, if I am religious, it means that I'm always talking about the Quran. No. That's not what it means. Second, we don't believe in do as I say, not as I do. Full stop. The Prophet ﷺ didn't do it. And when we do it, we are acting on hypocrisy. If you are having your kids learn Quran, you have an online tutor, you send them to maktab, or you can't just do those things and then expect that they'll be fixed. Oh, my kids are going to be solved because I bought this thing for them. No. You have to live it. You tell your kids to go to the masjid, guess what? You got to be at the masjid. You tell your kids to donate, guess what? You got to donate. You tell your kids to read Quran, guess what? You got to read Quran. Simple as that. Otherwise, what happens when they learn these things is it becomes as useless as algebra and calculus. You think I ever used those things? I learned them in school, and what? I forgot everything about it, right? And that's not what this deen is. You have to make it practical, have to make it lived. And lastly, you might think to yourself, oh, we're Muslim, right? That's enough, isn't it? I believe. But no. And I'll let the words of the Prophet ﷺ answer that. I mentioned Iblis, but I'll let the words of the Prophet ﷺ answer that. That he said there will be a time when knowledge disappears. And this companion, Ziyad radiallahu anh, he said that, Ya Rasulullah, how can it be when we're going to have the Quran and we're going to teach it to our families and people are going to read it until the day of resurrection? You know what the Prophet ﷺ said? He said, Ziyad, I thought you were smarter than that. He said, don't you see that these people from Ahl Kitab, don't they have their books? Don't they read them? What percentage of it do they follow? If that's what our fate is, it's not a good place to be in. And that's not where we can be, because belief has to inspire action. Those who believe and do good deeds. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to open our hearts to goodness. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to allow us to always combine action with our faith. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to allow us to enter into His paradise. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad kama sallaita ala Ibrahim wa ala ali Ibrahim innaka Hamidun Majid. Allahumma barik ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad kama barakta ala Ibrahim wa ala ali Ibrahim innaka Hamidun Majid. ربنا آتنا في الدنيا حسنة وفي الآخرة حسنة وقنا عذاب النار. ربنا ظلمنا أنفسنا وإن لم تغفر لنا وترحمنا لنكونن من الخاسرين. ربنا تقبل منا إنك أنت السميع العليم وتوب علينا يا مولانا إنك أنت التواب الرحيم. عباد الله إن الله يأمر بالعدل والإحسان وإيتاء ذي القربى وينهى عن الفحشاء والمنكر والبغي يعظكم لعلكم تذكرون. اذكروا الله العظيم يذكركم واشكروه يزدكم واستغفروه يغفر لكم واتقوه يجعل لكم من أمركم مخرجا. أقيموا الصلاة.